after the interest rate parity, our next subject is purchasing power parity. Again, parity stands for equilibrium or equality. Purchasing power means how much a US dollar can buy in terms of goods and services. And under the purchasing power parity, $1 in the US should buy the same stuff, same goods and services in another country. However, that's not always the case. Okay, so we need to understand the law of a one price. So purchasing power parity implies the law of one price. So if we are looking at identical product at different countries, if we just use the US dollar to measure this product's price, then the price should be the same as it is in the US, as it is in Japan, as it is in Russia, as it is in India. Okay, but of course, when we are looking at the dollar price of the product in India, we need to follow the exchange rate. We need to convert the local price in rupees to US dollars to get the dollar price in India. So under the law of one price, the India product's dollar price is equivalent to the US price. And here is one product, let's say it's a gold. It's a very liquid assets in the world. If in the US, 1 ounce of gold costs 300 US dollars and it costs 150 pounds in UK, then under the law of a one price or under the purchasing power parity, then the exchange rate of a US dollar and a British pound should be linked with 1 ounce of gold, and that would equalize $300 to 150 pounds. Both are price of gold in two countries, and then that would make the exchange rate to $2 per pound. Okay, however, that's not always the case. When we look at the actual exchange rate, we do not quite have this purchasing power parity. In other words, $1, what $1 can buy in the U.S. country, if you spend that $1, convert $1 into other currencies and spend that $1 in another country, you could buy different amount of stuff. And when we use the Big Mac, you know Big Mac, that's a hamburger, a McDonald's. One Big Mac in the U.S. would cost us $3.55 or so. And then in the UK, it would cost 2.29 pounds. And if we follow the actual exchange rate, then the dollar price in the UK for one Big Mac would be different than the dollar price in the US. And of course, the same situation exists in China, exists in Brazil. And then we will judge whether the currency is overvalued or undervalued. And this would be some skill we need to learn. So let me just give you some simple example to illustrate how the purchasing power parity implies. Let's say I'm using a product which is a hamburger, and in the US it is $1, and in the UK it is 1 pound. The same hamburger on the dollar menu of McDonald's, either in New York or in London. Under the purchasing power parity, then $1 can give us one burger in US. It should give us one burger in UK. So that's the essence of a purchasing power parity. So $1 has the same purchasing power in the US. You should have the same purchasing power in UK when we're buying the same product, which is a burger here. Okay. So under this framework of a purchasing power parity, then you know that the exchange rate, or we call it the PPP rate, PPP exchange rate, it should be $1 equals to 1 pound, or each pound is 1 US dollar per pound. Okay, but the actual exchange rate could violate it from this PPP exchange rate. Let's say in reality, the actual exchange rate is not the PPP rate. It instead is $1.5 per pound. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we can buy this one hamburger with $1 US? Absolutely not. So if we convert $1 in the US with the $1.5 per pound, then we would have a 2/3 of a pound or 0.67 pounds in our hands after the conversion based on this actual exchange rate. Does that give us a burger? No, it can only get us 2/3 of a burger. So that's a violation of purchasing power when $1 cannot buy the same stuff in another country as what we can in US at home. So when this is a violation, that basically means when the PPP rate, which serves as a benchmark, does not equal to the actual rate, then there could be undervaluation or overvaluation of the currency, British pound. All right, and you should have the skill to know what's the percentage of the undervaluation or overvaluation. Alrighty, so what would be the exchange rate, the PPP rate here? As I said earlier, this is $1 per pound, and the actual rate is $1.5 per pound. Then the undervaluation or overvaluation, if the number is negative, that's under. If a positive is over. So we are going to use the actual rate minus the PPP rate, which is a benchmark, divided by the PPP rate. And the actual rate is 1.5, the PPP rate is 1, then this would give us 50%. So this basically means the British pound is overvalued by 50%. So that's a violation of the purchasing power parity. And in the PowerPoint, we have Big Mac as a common commodity. I will explain why later. And if we do a survey and looking at the different Big Mac prices at different countries, and definitely that violate the law of one price. So what you see here is, for example, in China, one Big Mac is 12.5 yuan, and the actual exchange rate is $0.146 per yuan. And in that case, you would have the dollar price calculated, and the dollar price is certainly much smaller than the US price. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's say in China, a Big Mac is sold at a 12.5 Chinese yuan, and the actual exchange rate is $0.146 per yuan. So if you combine the actual exchange rate, this is the actual exchange rate, then you will need to get the dollar price of a Big Mac. So use 12.5 multiplied by 0.146. So this is 1.825 US dollars. So what does that mean? In US, the price is $3.57. And in China, if you want to buy a Big Mac, it only costs you 1.8 US dollars. So that means the US dollar has more purchasing power in China than in the US. So dollar has more purchasing power in China. Okay, because with the same dollar, you can buy one Big Mac in US, and you can buy almost two Big Macs in China. All right, so this is a two Big Macs, so this is one Big Mac. So with the same amount of dollar, you can buy twice more in China. But what about in our previous example? With the same dollar, if you have a $1, you buy one burger in US, but you can only buy 2/3 the burger in UK. So in this example, then dollar has less purchasing power in UK. Okay, so if it is if dollar has less purchasing power in UK, then that means the British pound is overvalued. Okay, if a dollar has less purchasing power in one country, then that country's currency is overvalued. And if a dollar has more purchasing power in another country, then that means what? that means the other currency is undervalued. So the conclusion would be Chinese yuan is undervalued. And by how much? Okay, how do we calculate that? We definitely have this actual rate. You see in this formula, we need to use the actual rate and the purchasing power parity rate. And we already have the actual exchange rate of Chinese yuan. And now we need to figure out the purchasing power parity rate. So the purchasing power parity rate is combined with the dollar price and the yuan price. In this $1 burger example, you see the dollar price of a burger in US is $1, in UK is £1. So the PPP rate would be $1 per pound. Okay, so you just use a dollar price divided by the yuan's price or the foreign price, and this would give you 0.2856. Alrighty, so if you put everything in the formula, so this is the PPP rate, and the PPP rate is the dollar price over the foreign exchange price. Okay, and then when I utilize the formula, so I use the actual rate, which is 0.146 minus 0.2856, which is a PPP rate, and this would be negative 48%. So Chinese yuan is undervalued by 48%. Okay, and here is a picture showing the overvaluation or undervaluation of the major currencies. So Chinese yuan is down the bottom. It's nearly 50% undervalued. So that means the US dollar has twice more purchasing power in China. And if you look at Norway, the Norwegian krone is almost 90% overvalued in terms of US currency. So that means you can buy only half in Norway with your US dollars compared to what you can buy in the US. And the other currencies that are overvalued would be Switzerland, Swiss franc, euros, Australian dollar, and so on, British pound. And there's no data for United States because there's no exchange. Japan, Singapore, and most of the developing countries have their currency undervalued. One reason behind a undervalued currency is they adopt a fixed exchange rate or a controlled exchange rate. So dollar has more purchasing power in that country, and we will buy more from them. So that encourages the exports of those countries. When we buy more from China, so the Chinese export increases. So that's what they want. They want to make money out of the United States.